o'clock. Actually, it's 9:01. I'm late. Okay, notice we didn't have, nobody even opened up their laptop, so this meeting should go really quick this morning. So we're going to start out with item 65. Laurie.
Do we need a roll call? No?
Oh, we need a roll call. I'm sorry.
Do we? Kempton's here. No.
Innovation Transportation, are they here? No, they're going to be late. So we're going to go right into, after roll call, we're going to go right into 65. Here.
Here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, item 65.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. So, item 65 and item 66, they're related items. Tab 65 is the hearing on the 2017 Active Transportation Program guidelines. Item 66 is the actual adoption of the guidelines. So the proposed guidelines are included as an attachment to tab 66. Correspondence received on the guidelines is included as an attachment to tab 65. And there's one comment letter that came in late, and that's from the Rural Counties Task Force, and that you should have that as a pink item. The Commission guidelines are to describe the policy, standards, criteria, and procedures for the development, adoption, and management of the Active Transportation Program. In March of 2014, the Commission adopted the first Active Transportation Program guidelines. In March of 2015, the Commission adopted revised guidelines for the 2015 ATP. The Commission may amend the guidelines after conducting at least one public hearing. Staff brought forward a draft version of the guidelines at the January Commission meeting. Staff conducted 4 workshops with the ATP Stakeholder Working Group to get feedback on the guidelines. We held a workshop in Sacramento, one in Los Angeles, one in Fresno, and then one more in Sacramento. People could participate in the workshops in person, by teleconference, and by webinar. We had very good attendance at the workshops, with typically over 50 people attending in person and over 100 participating by phone. Participants included representatives from regional agencies, cities, school districts, state agencies, walk and bike groups, advocates for disadvantaged communities, and community members. Staff also received numerous comments through letters, emails, and phone calls. If you recall, in the draft guidelines presented to the Commission in January, staff proposed reducing the points available for disadvantaged communities to 5 from 10. This issue dominated the workshops, and I'll come back to that later in my remarks. Staff believes that the guidelines before you today represent a general consensus of the ATP stakeholders, while acknowledging that everyone involved does not agree on every item, and staff needed to make some decisions for the good of the program. Some of the key revisions and clarifications in the 2017 ATP guidelines are the following. For non-infrastructure projects, we clarified that ATP funds are for startup projects, not to fund ongoing operations. However, program expansions or new components of existing programs are eligible. We made it more clear that the ATP will only fund active transportation plans that benefit a disadvantaged community. We added that project applications will be screened before evaluation for consistency with adopted regional plan, evidence of supplanting of funds, and project eligibility. Under the scoring criteria for the increasing walking and biking criteria, applicants are encouraged to describe how their project would address significant gap closures. Under the safety scoring criteria, we added that applicants can discuss how their projects reduce the risk of fatalities and injuries. And we added the process for project selection between project applications with the same score. And we also added that we will have a contingency list for the projects that are in the small urban and rural component. By far, most of the changes to the guidelines have to do with the disadvantaged communities. For the most part, the stakeholder work group did not support staff's original recommendation to reduce the disadvantaged communities points to 5. The group thought instead we should tighten up our definitions of disadvantaged communities, revise our scoring criteria to more of a sliding scale based on how severely the community is disadvantaged and how the project benefits the disadvantaged community. By making these changes, the group believes that the program will fund more projects to truly disadvantaged areas and make the 10 points much harder to attain. So we should have projects scoring more 2s, 3s, and 4s on this criteria as opposed to just 10. So we should have very few projects that are able to get all the 10 points. This should also make this criteria not so much a deciding factor on if a project gets funded or not. And that areas in the state that are not able to get these funds should be more competitive. So in this version of the guidelines, the disadvantaged communities points are back to 10. To tighten up the definition, we describe what should be considered a direct benefit. We clarified what we're looking for under the median household income criteria. We narrowed the use of the public school free and reduced lunch criteria to the project must be located within 2 miles of the school represented by the criteria, and we made the 4th option less open. The details of the scoring are still being worked out, but we think it'll be something like we would have 0 to 5 points for how severely disadvantaged the community is, and 0 to 5 points for how much of a benefit the project is providing to the disadvantaged community. And these points would be scaled. This was a difficult and contentious subject at the workshops, but I'm happy to say that the stakeholders are starting to build some consensus around this type of scoring matrix. Other suggestions that were raised by stakeholders that staff did not feel appropriate to change at this time was that some stakeholders would like the guidelines revised to give the MPOs discretion in their component to allow more than 2% of their funds to go to plans. Also, some stakeholders would like the guidelines to give a longer time frame for time extensions in the ATP. Currently, agencies can ask for 12 months. There's other things that we just were not able to address in this guidelines that we would like to work on for the next cycle, such as a better scoring matrix for the public health question. Before we open the hearing for public comment, I would like to thank all the stakeholders for their passion for this program, how hard they work on it, and the support they've given me in the process. And I'd also like to thank April Nitzos from Caltrans Local Assistance and her staff for their support and positive collaboration. At this point, staff recommends opening the hearing for public comment.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing. If you would line up at the microphone, a couple speakers ahead. Bill Sadler, Stephen Patchen, and Eric Bruins to start. And then Laura Cohen, Patricia Chen, Wendy Alfson, and Kenneth Cow on deck.
Mr. Chair, forgive me for having arrived a couple of minutes late, and you probably covered this. So that our speakers know, are you providing each with 2 minutes, or what are your direction to them as we start?
Well, and I think we mentioned it yesterday that we are willing to impose a time limit, but we would rather that you self-limit your testimony. So we don't want to be heavy-handed, but we will if we have to. So, Mr. Sadler, you're up, and you will set the pace, Mr. Sadler.
All right, I'll do my best.
So you are going to make or break this.
Good morning,
Here.
Commissioners. I'm Bill Sadler. I'm here with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. We're here to testify in support of the ATP guidelines. We've been actively involved with the process, as Lori mentioned, and we especially have been focused on the non-infrastructure guidelines and the Safe Routes to School projects, as this is an essential program for funding safe walking and bicycling to school projects around the state, including both safety encouragement programs and the actual infrastructure around schools. And we're a national nonprofit whose mission is to make it safer to walk and bike to school. And we like this program a lot, and it's funded a lot of great projects, and we'd like to see it continue, and that we are very supportive of the guidelines as they are. We commend the CTC for your leadership in implementing this program. It's a comprehensive statewide commitment to expand safe and active travel, especially in disadvantaged communities near schools and for residents of these communities. We especially commend the inclusive process that was set up to allow multiple stakeholders to weigh in on the guidelines over the past few months. And as I mentioned, we are, more than 3,000 schools have benefited from Safe Routes to School funding from ATP and its predecessor programs that were in place before the ATP was in existence for both infrastructure in your schools and non-infrastructure education and encouragement programs. Many schools would benefit from Safe Routes to School funding that haven't gotten it before, and the change to allow program expansions and additions to existing programs will make it easier for those schools to experiment with new types of programs and continue their programs, as a lot of these programs are better when they're in existence longer. The longevity makes safe walking and biking institutionalized as kids are growing up in these schools. So in closing, I just want to support the criteria for Safe Routes to School, and that the strong focus on that in the guidelines, as well as the disadvantaged communities criteria, because a lot of kids are walking and biking to schools in disadvantaged communities and need safer infrastructure. So thank you for allowing me to provide comments today, and we look forward to working with you to strengthen this program and implement it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Patchen.
Good morning. Steve Patchen from Southern California Association of Governments. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the guidelines. I'd like to thank you for all the work and dedication to this very important program. I'd like to thank staff for all of your work. It's a very tough job. You did it very admirably. The ATP program is an essential funding source for the SCAG RTP SCS. So we're very supportive overall of the guidelines. I'd like to just reiterate a few points that staff mentioned in the report. SCAG wants to express continued support for planning funding. About a third of our region yet does not have a bicycle plan, and about approximately 2/3 of our region do not have pedestrian plans. So as a result, we support the continued funding of planning, and we would support an increase in the percentage from the 2% restored to the 5% or somewhere in between. In addition, we would support any flexibility that the MPOs would have to establish that mark for the regional program. The other point I'd like to also highlight was the extension of project delivery guidelines from the current 12 months to a proposed 20 months, if possible. This extension would better accommodate those projects that are a little more complicated, multi-phased, and such. So those are our main two points of emphasis. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to comment, and look forward to working with you all and staff on Cycle 3, 2017 and future cycles. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bruins, then Laura Cohen, and Patricia Chen.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Eric Bruins. I'm the Policy Director at the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition. We are a local affiliate of the California Bicycle Coalition. I also serve on the Active Transportation Planning Technical Advisory Committee, although clearly we're not speaking in that capacity. So first I want to really appreciate staff. They have done a fantastic job of incorporating stakeholders. As Lori mentioned, the conversations, particularly around the disadvantaged communities, started out as being really contentious. But I think where we are right now really kind of respects the interest in making sure that it isn't a threshold issue, but that we are able to continue the program's strong emphasis on targeting the resources where they're most needed. One of the other things that really has been a huge issue for us in Southern California is planning. As Stephen mentioned, a majority of our jurisdictions simply don't have the comprehensive active transportation plans that we need in order to kind of identify what projects are priorities for our region, identify what projects are going to be competitive in future cycles of this, and frankly, when you have those comprehensive plans, that's how you're able to leverage complete streets policies and doing all these other things, so the active transportation program isn't the only funding game in town. Because what's happening right now is agencies are developing projects without taking into consideration the needs of active transportation, and then they're saying, "Oops, we built this. Now we have to come back to the commission for more money to do it later." So essentially, we're buying the same projects twice because we're not spending our limited funding on planning up front. So we would support greater flexibility. I think not all regions are as behind as we are in Southern California. So if we can give particularly the SCAG region, but MPOs the flexibility to put their own money into planning, that would be fantastic. And then the second thing would be we do support aligning the project delivery process more closely with the STIP. The STIP is really a fantastic way where the commission is really partnering with local agencies to figure out the timing to make sure that delivery is successful. Right now, ATP really is rigid, and I'm really concerned about project failures setting back this program in future years. So thank you very much for your consideration of these comments, and again, thank you so much to Lori and the rest of the staff for working with us so well. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Cohen, and then Patricia Chen.
Good morning, Laura Cohen. I'm the Western Region Director of Rails to Trails Conservancy. This has been a tremendous, tremendously popular program with a great deal of enthusiasm by stakeholders that I think Brian Annis discovered early on when the idea was first proposed, and continues unabated. So that's been fantastic. And we really do appreciate staff, Lori Waters in particular, for running a very open participatory process and being responsive to stakeholders. So I really want to acknowledge that. And a lot of the discussion has centered around disadvantaged communities, as was mentioned earlier, and kind of balancing two important objectives. One being that we want to provide enough structure in the guidelines so that funding is going to projects that truly benefit disadvantaged communities, and to discourage fudging on that topic. And then balancing that, there's a bit of a tension there with recognizing that connecting residents of disadvantaged communities to destinations, jobs, transit, recreation is a core goal of the ATP, and that connectivity is going to be how we really increase biking and walking. So I think the guidelines do a good job of balancing those two objectives, and we look forward to working with staff to then incorporate those concepts into the scoring and the application. So we look forward to continuing to work together on this really important program. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Chen, and then Ken.
Good morning. I'm Patricia Chen with LA Metro. Congratulations, Commission, on having adopted a second cycle and embarking on a third of this important and beneficial program. As we are gaining experience with sponsors delivering projects funded in Cycle 1, we're learning that there are issues arising that are very much not within the control of the sponsors, and sometimes they require more than 12 months to address. So we'd like to ask that the guidelines allow, on a case-by-case basis, longer extensions when the issue is clearly not within the control of the agency and just cannot be addressed within that 12-month time frame. And we'd also like to express our support for SCAG's request to have the flexibility to set its own target for the planning funds to better respond to the needs of the communities in the Southern California area. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll wait to the end. Kenneth. And then Wendy Alfson and Alan. I'll butcher it so I won't say it.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Kenneth Cow with MTC. I'll be very brief. Our comment letters are attached to your item as the first one. I just came up to really say thank you to staff. This was a Herculean effort. I know it's the third time that we've done this, and there's still room for improvement, but we did a wonderful job, and I just wanted to thank staff for that and working with us on the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chair. My name is Wendy Alfson. I'm with California Walks. We too are speaking in support of adoption of the guidelines in the program and want to join all of you and everyone else in thanking Ms. Jansen and Ms. Waters on a great job. I think that the contentiousness over the program is really based in the fact that it is too small for the need and the demand. You know, a lot of projects are delivered here for a very small amount of money. It's far less than the amount that you usually approve in overrides. And I just want to really put in a plug for growing the program, and that the high competitiveness of it comes directly from that. You know, it's only the projects that have scored over 90 out of 100 that can even hope to get funded. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alan?
Thank you. My name is Alan Abramson. I'm representing Los Angeles County and the County Engineers Association of California. I'd like to thank the CTC and Caltrans ATP teams for their diligent work on the program. LA County and CSAC is an advocate of active transportation and supports the program. Because ATP is still in its infancy, we are still seeing how the program is maturing and making adjustments to it. Today, your commission is to act on the 2017 guidelines, yet Cycle 3, yet we have until June 16th of this year for the allocation of the Cycle 1 funds. I've collected some information that I'm sure your staff will confirm or correct if the numbers are slightly off. Today on tab 88, you will approve 5 extensions for construction, bringing the total construction time extensions to 16 and all time extensions to 61. Today's request for allocation includes advances for 2 Cycle 2 projects and no Cycle 1 project allocations. Based on this meeting's report, allocations for construction in Cycle 1 are currently 90. There are 159 projects with construction phase only, plus 61 projects with multi-phases. For construction only, between now and the June meeting, 53 projects will either request allocation or time extensions or be deleted from the program. As we approach this point in time, less than 60% of the construction projects have been allocated for construction. What we are seeing is that projects, especially those with multiple phases, are challenged to meet the 2- and 3-year programming plan. The program is geared to construction-ready projects. With the current state of gas tax revenue, our agencies cannot invest and afford the funds and resources in projects without a commitment of construction funding. We need to request funding for both engineering and construction phases. How many engineering projects were funded in our first 2 cycles? Delivering multi-phase projects within the funding constraints is challenging on all of us. As such, the county and CSAC supports increasing the extension period from the current 12 months to at a minimum 20 months to match the STIP as a short-term solution. The county and CSAC also request that the commission to possibly adopt the guidelines with a stipulation to adjust the extension at a later date following completion of the June 2016 deadline for allocation, such that a full picture of this ATP's first program can be reviewed as to the number of allocations and time extensions. Is the program's goal to have good delivery record or deliver quality projects? Smaller projects may reach delivery sooner, but larger and impactful projects need time. Let's not think that good or large projects are not being applied for simply because they need more time to deliver. We are always challenged to deliver our programs, whether it be BMP, HSIP, etc. Let's be mindful of the challenges and fund the best projects within a reasonable time delivery timelines. Additionally, SB 99 that legislated ATP and codified in Streets and Highways Code required that subsequent ATP programs cover a 4 fiscal year period.
Excuse me. Wrap it up.
The first and second cycles of ATP setting up 2 and 3 year programs are causing project delivery issues. Taking full advantage of the 4-year funding will better provide for applicants to deliver multi-phase projects. This will allow realistic programming of funds and prevent frequent time extensions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? We'll take questions from the Commission.
Yes, I just had one question about, is there, I think that there's some, I'm not in favor of letting projects just, go on and on because people aren't moving the project. I think the program we set up under Prop 1B was pretty good about making sure people were accountable and got the projects out there. However, is there a way to set some very narrow criteria for a good project that has made all of the, has scored all the points, is clearly a good project, but is faced with some kind of external problem that has basically put that project on hold, or possibly could dump the project? I don't know. I'm not saying that you haven't already looked at that, but I would like to just get your response on it.
Well, I guess that would be the looking at them case by case. And I think our concern about that is that we would get a lot of that. It would be hard to determine what is merited or not. And so far, we've actually had good delivery on the program. And when we are aware of a potential issue ahead of time, we try to get on it right away and work through it to where we can get them allocated. And then they do have the 12-month time extension, which we looked back, and actually most of the ATP projects are not even requesting the full 12 months when they're asking for extension. So at this point, we have not seen a huge need.
Okay. I mean, we don't have the staff for a mountain of paperwork, so I was just trying to get your response. It sounds like you're on top of it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
There was a comment from Christine first. It looked like she'd been on. Forgive.
Thank you. Lori, I think you're, Ms. Waters, you're in receipt of a letter from the Public Health Alliance of Southern California. And thank you for your help with it. And Susan and I talked about it also, Susan Branson. So I just want to put it on the record. I thought they had some good points. I had a phone call with 2 of their members the other day, Tracy Delaney, who's the director. And they, as I understand it, want to see, a more data-driven process for a public health process. And they want to see, I guess, a finer-tuned evaluation process that would result in, they think, more effective programs. And then also a separate non-infrastructure application process for those projects. So I know these things have to be worked out. I'm prepared to support the staff recommendation today, but for future reference, I hope that we can keep that in mind and respond.
Thank you. I agree. I think that they do have some really good ideas, and I think most of the stakeholders would agree that we need the public health question to be a little bit more data-driven too. And we just didn't, because of other issues in this cycle, we didn't really have the time to work through it on the public health question, but I think that'll be a priority for the next cycle.
Good, thank you.
Oh, and we can also deal with that some in the when we train the evaluators too on how to evaluate that question.
Jim?
First of all, I think this is outstanding, and it's great to see the positive comments today compared to, what, 3 years ago or a couple years ago? That's because you're doing it instead of Mitch, I think. That's all. But the thing I was encouraged about is the safe routes to school piece. I mean, to me, especially in the rural areas, there's so many times where, you know, we talk about the MPOs, and I get that, and all the bigger entities, but there's a lot of rural areas in the state that are equally deserving. And I was happy to read the criteria, and I'm just hoping that we get some good applications from those areas and those parts of the state, and would encourage, you know, the rural counties and the other folks to aggressively apply. Is there anything else that the commission is going to be doing that will raise awareness of these availabilities of funds, or do you feel that communication is adequate with the various entities that would be applying already?
I think that there's lots of awareness on the program, and I think we always try to keep in mind the rural areas, because the nature of the program can seem to be very urban focused. So we always try to make sure that we're thinking about that in the guidelines and the application process, that we're not unintentionally doing something that's going to leave them out of the program. And we will do some more, we'll do another workshop on the application, and then Caltrans will hold trainings on the application by webinar too.
So outreach, we could say at the district level, will be one area where we can make sure the rural areas are reached.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
Very much.
And I'm always happy to go and speak anywhere that someone wants me to come and talk about the program.
Thank you very much.
Carl?
Thank you, and I want to continue the praise for Lori Waters and our team. You've just done an amazing job. The person from California Walks made a comment that I think resonated with all of us, that the dollar amounts that we have are too small for the need and the demand. You're correct. That also describes everything we're trying to do at the Commission in any aspect of transportation for the state of California. It's why we need to all remind our legislators in every funding category why we need robust funding for transportation in California. But it also underscores for me, as a cyclist who cycles more than he drives to work in the spring, summer, and fall months, why we have to leverage these limited dollars as best we can. I think I come across sometimes as anti-plan. It's not the case. It's just that I want to make sure that plans actually lead to projects and programs that are going to be a benefit. If you look at tab 65, page 1, background of the goals of the active transportation program, it's actually to increase the proportion of biking and walking trips, increase safety for non-motorized users, increase mobility for non-motorized users, etc. To me, that says you've got limited dollars, stretch them as much as you can. And that's why I think we have to be very careful about planning funds, because if it's a plan that sits on a shelf and is never built, those are funds that are not increasing those trips. They are not going to projects and programs that are materializing to benefit kids. The disadvantaged communities conversation is a conversation that's so important. But what we found after 2 cycles, and Lori, please correct me from the mic if I get this slightly wrong, is that the very wise foundation or floor that the legislature and governor asked for of 25% has materialized into 88% of all the funds. We all want to have safe routes to schools and better and more and safer bike and ped facilities for all Californians. And right now, that balance isn't at all being struck if this very competitive pot of funds is limiting non-quote-unquote disadvantaged communities to 12%. And I'll just bring it home. I live in a community that's, quote, not disadvantaged, and I'm blessed to live there, but we have no sidewalks at all. Our kids are completely unsafe trying to bike or walk to school because they have to walk into the streets in a community not at all quote unquote disadvantaged because we have no tax revenue to build sidewalks. So let's not forget we care about all of our communities and all of our kids, and Lori Waters and our team are trying to find that balance of stretching these dollars throughout our state. Lori, thanks again for your work.
Thank you.
Fine.
Lori and Earl, I certainly do want to join in commending you, because it's one thing when you have evaluations, which we had, and I think it's very important in programs like this to evaluate whether or not you're really achieving the goal that you are attempting to achieve to really help and affect all communities. The 88% I found was not consistent with the legislation, and I am very interested to see, with these adjustments, whether or not we also determine whether, in fact, the community is at disadvantage, and whether or not this will impact those people who are disadvantaged. And I think if you look at something like school lunch, is a good method of evaluation. So I commend you for making adjustments, because none of us want to be unfair. But I hope we continue to evaluate to see if we're meeting the population needs, both planning and also allocation of funds. So I'll be very interested in seeing where we move. And I'm glad to see they have more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lori and Laurel, thank you for the great work you've done over the last few months in kind of tightening up some of the requirements and restrictions. I was especially pleased to see the disadvantaged communities, the new guidelines that you added, and I can tell you that a lot of the folks in Central California, which have benefited from these funds, are very pleased and supportive of the new guidelines. Just for everybody's information, some of the communities that these funds have been going to are suffering from 50 and 60% unemployment, where average household income is $25,000 to $30,000. I mean, it's a different part of the world. Central California, sometimes parts of Central California like Mendota, Huron, some of these Three Rivers, San Joaquin, some of these communities you feel like you're in a different country. So, but yet we have to be fair. So the new guidelines will help kind of set apart the DACs from the true DACs. So I commend your hard work over the last few months, and I'll be very supportive of your recommendations. Thank you.
Lucy?
Thank you. Thanks also, Lori, for your hard work. I'm particularly fascinated by the amount of funds put into disadvantaged communities for a number of reasons, but I don't think we've perfected a really great way of measuring work to school, bike to school, bike to home, bike to school, bike to work, which is very intriguing to me because of the fact that we're trying to reduce vehicular travel in everything that we're hearing out of our leaders' vision for the state. And I would really like us to think in the future about how important recreational opportunities are, important is the health component of that, but how to perfect better that measurement, that metric, that we're actually taking cars off the road, and I'm not seeing cars line up at schools to drop off kids, et cetera. So I would really like us to think about that at some point in a much more deep way. Everyone will tell me that they're doing it now, but I don't see it during I don't see it during the week. I see a lot of great cyclists on the weekends running through my stoplights. So if you could take a look at that, that would be helpful. The second thing is, if you could, I didn't want to miss this one, Lori, but I don't want you to be, personally, I don't want you to be overwhelmed by case exceptions or a review, but you are so smart at understanding where a real project might need the benefit of the doubt. And if there's a way to put into these guidelines allowing you a criteria of some kind to allow you the flexibility, you should not get every project that comes before you should not have an opportunity for a case-by-case review. But if you could amend your proposal today to include an opportunity for you to be smart and think and say, look, I might have to do some flexibility on a project because it met a beyond the pale criteria. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I would like us to have that opportunity to use our brains.
Yeah, I think maybe we could look at for putting some language in there about really extraordinary situations or something like that, that we could do a longer extension.
Yeah. Nothing should be black and
Right.
white, but I totally understand. I don't want you to be overwhelmed
Right.
with everybody saying I'm
Yeah.
the exception, but there are clearly things that we have as staff. You've been very flexible over years
Right.
on many projects.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The other thing I did want to mention on your first comment, that something I did not bring up is that because of all of the discussion around disadvantaged communities, I felt like we didn't talk enough about increasing walking and biking. So,
Yes.
so what we moved points around a little bit and added 5 points to the first question, which is about increasing walking and biking. So
Right.
hopefully we will be able to get at some of the issues that you brought up too.
Thank you.
There.
Thanks.
Graham?
I too want to add my thanks to all of those who participated and the leadership of our staff. But a couple of questions, and really to build on Commissioner Dunn's points, where we're triggering an EIR, Lord knows, that's just time constraint that there's nothing to do but work through that process. And I really don't want to have a project not go forward because of that. And then also on the bike to work, bike to home, bike to school, I really am interested in those that don't have lots of choices. And I know we've tried to recognize, but it's one thing if it's a nice day and I decide not to drive, I think I'll take my bike. But if I'm in a family with only one vehicle and I don't have a choice, to me that trip of providing that ability of a safe route to school is precious. And I think that they're all precious, but I think that's really important. So those communities somehow where we can measure not only how many folks are, this is their only way of safely getting there is really, really important, I think.
Yes, in the scoring criteria, which is in the application, we are going to be addressing things like that, where you get the points are going to be scaled, such as if you could show those kinds of things, and you get another point or two. And the idea of this, and to look at the severity of the community, is to try to get the disadvantaged community funds to go to more the communities like Commissioner Assemi was bringing up, the ones that are really the most needy, and not as much the ones that maybe are on the edge. So, thank you.
No further questions. I want to commend staff and the stakeholders for really putting together a quality product. And with that, we'll close the public hearing. Next item would be item 66.
So the item 66 is the adoption of the guidelines.
Second.
Motion by Dapper. Second was
Assemi.
Assemi.
I, for one, would love to hear the finishing of her sentence.
Well, I was just going to say that we're working on some language now to address the time extension. So,
Though I love the enthusiasm of my colleagues.
okay, so my boss here came up with some quick language. Under project delivery, we could add, if extraordinary issues exist that require a longer extension, the implementer may request up to 20 months for allocation only. Would that, do you think that would be?
That'll work.
That's good. Okay. Okay, so we can put that in. So then, so the action item would be to adopt the 2017 ATP program guidelines as recommended with this one addition then.
Could you read the addition one more time, please?
Yes. If extraordinary issues exist that require a longer extension, the implementer may request up to 20 months for allocation only.
With that, that'll make the motion.
The maker of the motion and the second, is that okay? Yes. Those amendments? Very good. Any further questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
Item 67.
Okay. So this, Commissioners, this is an action item to adopt the 2017 Active Transportation Program Guidelines, the Metropolitan Planning Organization competitive component for MTC. SB 99 allows the Commission to adopt guidelines proposed by MPOs for administering their MPO competitive component of the ATP. The MPO guidelines must be generally consistent with the state guidelines, but they are allowed discretion in certain areas, such as asking for a supplemental call for projects and project selection criteria and weighting. MTC is opting to hold a supplemental call for projects, to use their own definition of disadvantaged communities, to require matching funds, and to use additional project evaluation criteria. Commission staff reviewed MTC's guidelines and found them consistent with the statewide guidelines. Staff recommends your approval of MTC's 2017 ATP guidelines.
Second.
Motion by Tavaloni, second by Assimi. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 68.
Commissioners, this is an action item to approve technical adjustments to programming for the 2015 Active Transportation Program statewide and small urban and rural components. The 2015 ATP statewide and small urban and rural components were adopted by the Commission at the October 2015 meeting. At that meeting, staff indicated that there would likely be the need for additional technical changes and corrections. The adopted 2015 ATP resolution includes a clause authorizing staff, in consultation with Caltrans and regional agencies, to make further technical changes, with all substantive changes to be brought back to the Commission for approval. The attachment to this item lists all the identified adjustments to the 2015 ATP statewide and small urban and rural components. Staff will bring forward technical corrections to the 2015 ATP MPO component at the May Commission meeting. Staff recommends your approval of this item.
Move it. Second.
Excuse me. Motion by Tavaloni, second by Assimi. Any other questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.
Item 69. Stephen?
Yes, Commissioners. Item 69 is the Proposition 1B quarterly reports. At this meeting, we are going to be concentrating on the traffic light synchronization program. This is a $250 million program. $243 million have been allocated. There's a balance of $7 million that's still unallocated. This money belongs to the city of LA. They have two projects that don't seem to be moving forward. And on top of it, the city of LA also has about $35 million in active projects. And so far, they've billed us only for about $6 million. And most of these active projects are about being reported as being 90% complete. So we have asked representatives of the city of LA to come before the commission today and tell us what is happening and how they will bring their numbers back up to the rest of the standard of this program.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Varesh Janoyan. I'm a Senior Transportation Engineer with the City of Los Angeles Transportation Department. Before I start my presentation, I would like to thank the Commission, its staff, and Caltrans staff for their continued support from the onset of the TLSP program for the City of LA. I have been involved in the program almost from its inception in 2008 for us. Let me answer the quick question about the allocation versus expenditure on the $35 million projects that we have allocated. We have built about, like staff has it on the table, we have built $5.8 million. when we submitted the baseline agreement back in 2008 for the program, it was the entire program was based on having full-time staff of 2 teams to design and package and go into construction of the TLSP program. When the recession in 2008 hit, the city council enforced a very hard hiring freeze. So as a result, we lost a lot of staff to promotions, retirement, taking jobs elsewhere, and not just engineering staff, but our administrative staff in accounting and administrators. So as a result, we continued with the staff that we have, and we delivered a lot of projects. We delivered about 13 out of the 22 projects, and we have several other that nearing completion. But our one of the things that happened, and that's an oversight and mistake on our part, was that we did not come back to the commission and requested an amendment baseline agreement to change the schedules. So that's why it shows some of the projects that are behind schedule, and that's a lesson learned for us, that although we continued asking for allocations, we did not change the schedule to fit the current schedule. So as a result, we have actually again, let me answer the question of the 5.8 million expenditure on the 35 million allocations. Because we couldn't, staffing shortages, and we couldn't build fast enough, we have a backlog of billing. So today we have $13 million ready to be built by our accounting staff. That our accounting unit went from 4 or 5 accountant to 1, and now they're staffing back up. Engineering staff, we went from 2 teams to barely 1 team that was doing designs. So we are in a much better shape today. We just the city, our department just hired over 32 engineers. We got a few of them for the TLSP program. So that 5.8 million in allocation, it's really $18 million. I mean, in expenditure, $18 million in expenditures that we will be billing within the next few weeks. We have 2 remaining projects that we have not requested allocation, and as we speak, we have staff designing and preparing packages for the 2 remaining projects. We will be coming back to the commission by the September meeting, if not earlier, to request an amendment to the schedule for these 2 projects, and then request an allocation for the remaining balance in our program. So with that, let me take any questions the commission may have.
So our understanding is that on the unallocated projects, you're going to be back in September and be requesting an allocation. So you'll have your design all done and you'll be ready to go.
That is correct.
And on the unbilled projects, you're going to be submitting the wayward bills, and we will be catching up on that.
That is correct. We have
obviously LA needs the money. It just doesn't want to collect it.
Commissioner?
I can't tell you how sad this makes me as one of those folks that's stuck in LA traffic on a regular basis. We are always at the top of the list of the worst congestion. So to hear these explanations really troubles me, because I think we're penny wise and pound foolish when we do this. Traffic synchronization is one of those things we can do without adding more capacity. It's using what we have more efficiently. And I just don't get it. I think that we've got to do better. First of all, I mean, we have a huge, dense population. This is just not acceptable, in my opinion. Plus, we're about in Los Angeles County to go back and ask our voters to support us with more sales tax investment. And this makes all of us look inefficient and foolish. And so if you could report back to us in a month or two, and just until we get this, you know, it's kind of our tradition here when we get projects that we worry about, that we kind of have a watch list. And this, we all have to be good stewards of absolutely every dollar, and there has to be a way. So as a former chair of the LA Chamber, I'm happy to get the business community to weigh in, whatever we need, but let's do better.
Okay, if I may respond, we've never slowed down on delivering the projects. Like staff report indicates, we have already expended almost $97 million of the program, just over $97 million of the Prop 1B funds. Since 2008, we have continued to design and build the systems, so I share your concern, but you know, we are working as fast as we can to deliver on these projects.
Yeah, I'm going to be less charitable, but I totally echo Commissioner Inman's comments. I think this is just an absolute embarrassment. You know, as somebody who drives into Los Angeles, now I know why the traffic lights aren't fixed. And you can make excuses, but, you know, 2008, the commission adopted regulations and, you know, the procedures. And here we are 8 years later, and here was a gift specifically written into Prop 1B for Los Angeles, got the lion's share of the money when it came to traffic synchronization, and you haven't done very much with it. So I will suggest that you do come back at our next meeting, and I'd frankly like to figure out, you know, I wish there was some way that there would be some punitive measures added to this, because it's an absolute, I mean, talk about CARB would be a little concerned about reading some of this stuff. We have air quality issues to be concerned about, traffic issues, we're constantly worried about congestion, and yet it doesn't seem like, you know, excuse, that's just unacceptable. So I would hope that, and I understand you're the messenger, but this is absolutely not consistent with the stellar track record that Prop 1B had on so many other projects, to see something like this as poorly managed and handled as it has been. And I would hope that we would have you guys come back next month to give us an update, tell us you build that $13 million, and give us the plan to get the rest of this money spent, so the voters of California and the people of Los Angeles recognize the fact that when they vote for something, you actually do it instead of letting the money just sit around where things cost more as time goes on and everything else. So I think it's really unfortunate to have read this, and I would hope that you guys would step it up a little.
I'm very interested in finding out the projects that you're coming back with for allocation. Which projects are those?
So they are labeled as
Central Business District.
Central Business District, ATCS Central Business District, and ATCS Los Angeles Phase 2. So the
does that tie into the connector at all, or is it separately?
These are signal synchronization projects. So we are taking a specific area of the city, in this case the downtown area, and connecting it to the traffic management center.
Well, you know, I'm not going to talk about how after recession everybody should have been working when there was not a lot of money in 2008 and that time after that, but you're coming back now to the citizens of Los Angeles for more taxes. You're proposing another large increase, and it's going to be very important for people to see some of these things completed if you're going to put it on for the next election to ask for more and more money. And, you know, R was very important, and I think all of us supported it. But support will come if we really know that the money is going to be used and what it's going to be used for. And the Central Business District, I think we're all interested in seeing that go through. But it's important, but it's also important for some of the other areas. I want to tell you where I live, the traffic. At 8 o'clock in the morning, it takes about an hour to go a half mile.
Any other?
To the, Mr. Chairman, I wonder, I appreciate the gentleman's statement and all the commissioners' comments, but this gentleman isn't in charge, and I wonder if we could hear from, the city's director of transportation or the mayor's office, if he's got one accountant when he should have 5, what's it like in engineering and programming? And who is making those changes to get these things back on track? The lights aren't going to synchronize themselves no matter how much money is directed to the program unless there's people at this desk. So
Next month, can we have her make the report or him? I don't know who it is.
We could ask, but I want to be.
Well, I think we should ask, really.
I want to be.
I'm sorry? No, it's the Department of Transportation. Sarita Reynolds is our general manager.
Well, I hope you take the message back to your.
I will.
To your bosses, but I'll be a little bit more charitable to the city than Commissioner Madaffer was. They have actually, out of the $140 million that the city received in Prop 1B funds, they have stepped up and did the lion's share. They only are lagging on about $7 million for 2 projects. And the reason we're here is just to light the fire under them to get those 2 projects delivered. The other stuff is just being behind in billing. Well, obviously they need the money, but somehow they decided that they're going to bill us late.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other items on this one, Stephen?
No.
Okay.
We have our work cut out for next month.
Okay, well, thank you very much. To keep the love going in the room, now we're going to go down to item 77.
Yes, Commissioners. Yesterday, we powered through most of the supplemental allocation requests. We had 9 on the agenda. We've approved 7 of these, and we have 2 left that need further discussion, item 77 and item 78. The district is here to answer questions, but before we get to the questions, I want to do a little learning moment here. Learning.
He says that I base my comments on the wrong
foghorn leghorn
information. Okay.
Usually, when a project starts its life, it's a gleam in the engineer's eye, and they do a project initiation document. But that document is based mostly on probably 20% known things and 80% unknown, basically 80% risk. And that is the number that gets programmed into the programming documents. For the project at hand under item 77, that was the Schuyler-Heim Bridge, and the project was programmed at about $270 million. But again, that was based on 20% known and about 80% risk. As the project gets designed, environmental processes are done, locations are found, drilling is down in the ground, you gain more insight as to what you're doing and how you're going to do it. So the engineers design a set of plans and a set of specifications. By that time, you're probably think that you know about 90% and your risk is about 10%. That is then taken out to the market. Contractors bid on this based on the information that's provided to them. Now, if you're wrong in that information, you thought you knew 90% and you didn't know 10%. In actuality, you knew 70% and you didn't know 30%, but you just didn't know that. Then you get into trouble. The contractor bids on what he's given, and he's assuming that information that he gets is at the 90-10% level. He puts in his bid and does the work based on his means and methods. As things turned out to be different than what everybody thought, you did a certain amount of drilling to see, took core samples to see what's there underground, but you can't put in 10,000 holes. If you did that, you'd really know what's there. You put in 10 or 12 holes, and you interpolate between those. And you assume that it's constant between, but it could be, especially in this area where there's a lot of filling done. Turns out there's lots of man-made objects, lots of utilities are put in. This is an old oil field or oil wells. There's all kinds of pipelines, all kinds of stuff down there. And if your drilling didn't happen to hit any of this stuff, you think there's nothing there. Once the contractor starts digging, he starts finding all kinds of stuff, and he says, wait a minute, my bid isn't based on finding large, huge chunks of concrete or old mattresses or whatever is down there. And he says, now you got to pay me for removing this stuff. And in this instance, a lot of stuff was found when they started drilling for the actual foundations themselves, that there was all kinds of stuff in there. The utility owners didn't locate their utilities in time for the contractor to know where it is, and this stuff had to be moved. Contractor gets delayed, and as the process goes on, when we thought that contractor said, I can do this for $210 million, and that's what the project was awarded at, it turns out that there's more stuff that needs to be paid for. The department has what we know is G12 authority, where they are able to supplement the contract as it goes on, but it's limited by the commission, and after it exceeds the G12 limit, the department has to come back to the commission and ask for more money. This project right now has about $231 million, but it needs more money. We don't know exactly how much. This project is being run on a risk management basis. And at this point, the risk registers tell us that they will, in order to complete this project, they will need another $58 million. We don't know if that's right or not either, but it's at the 50% risk level. What we are assuming is that half of the stuff will turn out to be more and half of the stuff will turn out to be less, but in the end we're going to wind up at about 50%. Most of the risk management is run on the 50% level. So at this point in time, the department has run out of money in this contract. It needs more money to keep the contractor working. So it's asking, please give us money to cover us at the 50% risk level, which is the $58 million. So that's the broad strokes and the education moment on what's going on. And if you have specific questions, the district representative is here to answer those.
Mr. Chairman, as I think most of you know, I've always been a big critic of these supplementals. But in this case, this is more or less like remodeling an old house. And when you open up the wall, you find out you didn't count on that. So this is a very important project. It's been around a long time. So I would go ahead and move approval of this supplemental.
Motion by Gametti, second by Assimi.
No, second by Madaffer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Madaffer. Any other questions?
Yes. I have a question for Stephen. So, I mean, to be fair to the taxpayers of California and to the contractor and to the agency, how do we tighten these things up so that we don't have these massive? I mean, I get it. We've done lots of old home remodeling, and you don't know what happens when you open up a wall. What's behind it, especially if it's an 80-year-old home. But how do we tighten this up so we don't run into this? Because basically, what you're saying is that, hey, on complex projects, we have no idea basically, and we can have cost overrun after cost overrun, and we'd be dealing with supplementals on a regular basis. How do we not?
Well, listen,
and that money's going to come from some other part. We just heard how short we are on ATP funds, and I know eventually the money comes from similar sources.
Well, to be fair to this project originally was put in at $270 million. And as the designers thought that they knew more, they reduced their risk contingencies until we wound up with a $210 million project.
No, I realize that.
But it turned out that what we thought that we knew, we didn't know. This is a very difficult area. This is Terminal Island in the port of Los Angeles. It's an old oil field. It's an area that has a lot of fill put into it. And I think where the mistake was made, that the designers thought that they knew what they knew, but they didn't know as much as they thought that they knew. And now as you open up those walls and you find those termites, it's costing you more.
So is it we need different designers that are familiar with these? I mean, we have complex projects, I get it.
You do assumptions, and sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're wrong. And this one, I believe, when they were looking at it and they thought we knew everything that we knew, and now we've got a good price, it turned out that it wasn't the right price. And we're now back at around what they originally estimated this thing to be when they knew absolutely nothing.
Well, you know, I think, and as chair, I probably shouldn't speak, but I'm going to. If this project had come in on its own, this explanation, there would be no issue here.
Correct.
But this project came in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
With 7 others from the district,
it was
yes.
8th. That was the frustration of the commission. We have 9 requests for additional funds with the same people all involved. That's the frustration.
Yes, out of the 9, we have 7 that are the same people.
Okay, but by the time we got down to this one, people were pretty well frustrated. And the idea of having you here today is the whole thing is unacceptable. This particular project on its own, we would have probably moaned and bitched a little bit, but it would have just sailed through, like this morning. But here we go. And that's why we wanted you here today. We want to know what steps you're going to take so that the next time we come to the commission meeting, we don't have 7 in a row. 3.2%, okay, that kind of stuff happens. That's where you don't know what you don't know. But when you start talking about 17%, 65%, 27%, 26%, 27%, 48%, 77%, and now this one at, and quite a substantial amount of money at 27.8%. That's the issue. And so I think the question now is, as you look down this list, what are we doing to fix the problem? This project today is just a symptom of the problem.
Well, to sum it all up, Commissioner, the real problem here is that we have one district that has 7 requests all at once.
Right.
Normally, a district would have 1 or 2 a year, not 7, and we're not even finished with the year yet. So there seems to be some kind of a overall problem in the district that needs to be fixed. It's not a particular project, it's just what's going on that we have 7 from 1 and at one time.
Sure.
On this, so as you address that question, I just have one, just to get some clarity in my mind. How long have you been in this district, and were these projects already there creating a problem that you had to deal with when you got there, or did they happen under your watch?
Well, first of all, good morning. My name is Shirley Choate. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Feel the love.
I am the District 7 Chief Deputy District Director, and I've been since June, a year and a half ago. So about 18 months. I've been in the department, however, for 30 years plus. Were these projects under my watch? Obviously, they've been a long time, and we've been having issues with the cost and estimates and such, and they're difficult to put our arms around before we come before you. So I became aware of that they were problematic when I did come on board, some of it anyway. But in order to quantify and be ready to give you a good estimate, and we had to do pretty robust risk management and the exposure report, hire consultants and such to tell us exactly what was going on. So they are projects that have happened, not necessarily my watch, but yes, during my watch, because obviously I'm here. I understand your frustration with 7. It is never our intent to come before you. If I could have it our way, we wouldn't be here ever. It's not a fun thing, obviously, and we take it very seriously, and we don't take it lightly at all. Your message has been reverberating in the district. It does get through. And so what we are doing differently to address Commissioner Semi's issue, and I heard it was addressed yesterday too, one of our big problems is estimating. And so one of the things that we have put in place in the last 6 months is we've assigned a risk management team dedicated full-time to look at the risk registers and not just qualifying, which is what we do with risks for most projects, but quantifying also and learning that technique. And so our intent with this risk management team is to develop risk-based estimates, not just the estimates where we look at the recent past and history, but looking forward and based on the risks that are ahead of us, and integrate those risks into our estimates so that then we could build contingencies perhaps represented in our supplemental work above and beyond the bid items that are represented in a bid in the contract. Other things that we're doing is that, and you must hear this, we come forward and we say lessons learned. You're probably tired of hearing of that. And having been in this program project management, we struggle with capturing lessons learned and then sharing it. So what we've done recently in the district is that we've assigned a focused, dedicated individual. Just their purpose in life is to capture, document, and then share. Come up with a process, not just a repository database, which we already have, but to have where we have a systematic way of engaging our PDTs at the right benchmarks of development of the project, gather these lessons learned, put it there and share it, and regularly on our meetings that we do have forums to share, that we do that. The other key thing, and the last thing I'll share, because there's a lot of things that we could do, but a major area that we've been improving on is in our communication, not just internally but externally with our partners, outreach to contractors, utility companies, railroads. But internally what we've done is change control. We've created, since December, formed a executive change control committee that meets weekly every Friday, where PMs and PDTs come forward and share what changes that they're contemplating or proposing on a project. This change committee approves, disapproves, and it goes on from there. The other practice that we've had in place for a year and a half since I've come on board is I've implemented something that other districts have done. In fact, I think I learned it from District 8 and 12, and that is what's called an exec review hour. It's 1 hour a week that execs have it on their calendar reserved for issue resolution by project delivery, but also other programs, so that our busy schedules, we have time, literally, people come forward and say they have these issues to come before exec team, and the intent is timely issue resolution. So those things we put into place, and we're hoping that, again, get the message out there. We do not like to come before you with supplemental requests, and we hope with at least some of those, including some of the things that I didn't even mention, putting that in place with a new management team that's invigorated, leadership trainings, estimating trainings. We're hoping all of that you won't see us.
Chair. Thank you, Shirley. I have a question for Malcolm. Shirley just brought up some great points and how to learn from the lessons. How is the agency taking advantage of this and making sure these programs or lessons, learning from the lessons, are implemented statewide?
Well, I think Shirley talked about some of the lessons learned and shared that some of the things that they've picked up on and are implementing actually were lessons learned or best practices from other districts. Each of the programs within within project delivery, project management, environmental, right-of-way, construction, design, each meet on a regular basis as divisions and also share lessons learned and best practices as well as identify problems and then start to work through some of the solutions. So in the programs, they're sharing information statewide as they deliver the different components in project delivery. So again, whether it's design or construction or environmental, that's probably the best way that we're sharing lessons learned. The other thing that I think Shirley appropriately talked about was lessons learned within the district such that they're getting rolled out to others within the district and then lessons learned in between districts as well.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Fran?
Well, Shirley, thanks for coming down. And yes, we should have said good morning first. So, yeah, apologize for that. But, you know, I think if we look at our big challenges here, they're primarily bridges. I mean, that's, you know, and we have challenge with that. So, Stephen, your description that these projects are born from a gleam in our eye and we kind of throw the dartboard. But I think, you know, when we have oil fields, an old military base, I mean, you name it, I think that we need to think about, is there a better way? Because I'd say most of our struggle is really on these bridges that happen to be heavy trade corridor and important to our state and our nation's economy as well. So I think, Malcolm, for under your leadership too, just let's continue to challenge ourselves because every dollar is precious and we're all working hard to get more investment in our infrastructure, but we can't afford not to spend absolutely every dollar in the best manner. And I know these are difficult, complicated, but let's tighten it up as best we can. And District 7 is a huge district, too, so I'm going to say that in defense.
Just a very fast comment. Oh, no, go ahead.
My thought as we've gone through this is sometimes I need to put the magnifying glass back to myself or look at the mirror. You know, I think when it comes to the issue of not knowing as much as I think I know, I'm probably an expert at that. I've probably made a career of it in some ways, and I imagine a few of us on this board have at times done the same. So this is a work in progress. But if you need a retiree annuitant that can give advice that I think I know, but I really don't, I might be available.
If you come with no cost, absolutely.
You did exactly what he's worth. You did exactly what he's worth there.
So I guess you already know the value of the of the advice.
You might take him on anyway, 'cause he's pretty good.
I just have one comment. The estimator who came up with the first estimate, which was a guess, I've been told, we probably should use him since he was right.
Having said all of that, staff would recommend that you approve the supplemental allocation.
Well, there is a motion on the floor, actually, and a second to approve the motion. So if there are no further questions, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. One. Did you get that, Douglas? Very good. Item 78.
Yes, that takes us to item 78. The question, that one that was left from yesterday was, why was there such a difference in interpretation of a fish and game permit? I believe it was Commissioner Gilmetti who asked the question, and since he's gone, do we still need to answer it? And what happened there is, I believe the department thought that the working in the channel was defined as where the water was actually by the department, and by fish and game it was from levee to levee, which then precluded the contractor to work as much in the channel as he thought that he would be able to.
So I understood the question first and foremost was whether a fishing game permit was obtained prior to construction. And the answer to that is yes. There were 7 permitting agencies and all required permits were obtained prior to construction. The permit requirements and conditions were represented in our plans and special provisions. The problem was with the restrictive construction windows, which were based on the permits for the work in and around the Santa Clara River. And when the contractor started in May to clear and grow the area, there were multiple protected bird nests discovered, which prohibited construction for 4 months until the end of September. And then by then, the winter permit restrictions within the stream bed took effect. The contractor could not work for an additional 6 months until the following April. So essentially, the bulk of this request represents the impact and costs incurred due to the delay of almost a year.
Okay. Well, who was, the motion was Yvonne, and the second was Joe. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, I just want to thank you again. We know you stepped into a difficult situation and you've handled yourself with professionalism and grace. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we will pick up again at 10:30.